Okay, hello everyone. It says that we are live. Hello, good evening everyone. Welcome to the lunar landing debate. My name is Danielle Dallas Roosa, and I'm excited to have you all watching this very thought-provoking conversation. In fact, there was a debate about whether or not we should have this debate, and I think it's just super beneficial to see all sides of an argument. The reason I'm so excited about this is because my grandfather was on Apollo 14, and at Back to Space, my company, we are on a mission to connect humans with the stars. We actually do regular live streams about different topics about space. So make sure you sign up for our newsletter, and that will inform you about other live streams and also what the Back to Space community is up to. You can find that link in the bio of this video. But today we are having a debate about the Apollo mission. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our amazing speakers. First, we have Colonel Mike Mullane, a retired astronaut who flew on 3 NASA space shuttle missions. He is also a highly decorated military officer and the best-selling author of Writing Rockets, which I have read and I love. It is a great look into his life and what led him to NASA and the journey of becoming an astronaut. I am super excited and thankful to have him here today. Thanks, Mike, for being here.
Thank you for the pump up on my book there.
I love it. One of my favorite space books. We also have Jarrah White. He is the leading Apollo Hoax Theorist. He's also an Australian filmmaker, astrophysicist, and geologist. Before we begin this debate, let me just preface this by saying Jarrah is not a flat earther, nor is he a lunar landing denier. He has told me in emails he is a lunar landing doubter. And I'm very excited to have him on this conversation. Thank you, Jarrah, for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah,
Pleasure to be here.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. I won't do that again, I promise. Tonight, these two gentlemen will be debating the following. Did the United States government land astronauts on the moon? But before we begin, let me just make it clear to everyone what my role is. No one, and I've talked to them for quite some time, I have total faith, but no one is going to be disrespectful to one another. No one is going to be talking over each other. I am here to make sure this is a debate and not a monologue, kind of like how politics used to be, you know. So I will pass it over here to Colonel Mike Mullane, and he will kick it off.
Well, I guess thank you very much, Danielle. And Jarrah, you said something there that I would like you to clarify. Doubter instead of denier. Does that mean that I could convince you in this meeting that to close down your website and forget it, that you're an absolute believer?
If it turns out that the Apollo missions are real, I've actually said this in the past and stuff. Bill Casing, who was the original guy to say that we didn't go to the moon, right? He had stated at the end of his book that if it turned out that he was wrong, he would make a public apology to the astronauts. And he was known as the grandfather of the Apollo Hoax theory. I'm kind of been known as the grandson, and I kind of hold myself to that same standard. And the reason I don't like the word moon landing denier is because, well, deniers just deny anything that that's inconvenient. Any evidence to the contrary, no, they just shove it to the side. I think that's a more suitable term for flat earthers. You know, you can show flat earthers a picture of the Earth from space. You can show them, you know, ships disappearing over the horizon. No. There's all some silly excuse that they come up with. And what my position is based on well, I looked at the evidence. I've looked at both sides of things, and the evidence suggests to me that they didn't go to the moon. Okay, and so I call myself a doubter, because just if it's any consolation for Danielle, I don't dispute that your grandfather made it to space. I believe he made it into Earth orbit and stuff. What I dispute is that they went higher than Earth orbit. I believe they stayed in Earth orbit the whole time, and we'll probably get into this later and stuff. But NASA, for all intents and purposes, pulled a Zond 5, you know, like where they sent a probe to the moon, sending voices and videos back and whatnot and stuff. You know, the Soviets demonstrated how to pull off a hoax such that people could be convinced.
Okay,
so
well,
that's my position.
Okay, well, you cleared up a few things, saying that you're open to believing that we actually did land on the moon. But so what I'm understanding is you're saying we never launched Saturn V's. All of that was fake. There was no crowds down at the Kennedy Space Center watching Saturn V's lift off, carrying astronauts toward the moon. I mean, when you say doubt, what exactly is the moment at which fact in the space program became fiction? What was it that you're saying that when they said your go for the burn to go to the moon, you're saying that's where it ended? It was now fake from that point on?
What I'm saying is that the astronauts, they were launched with the Saturn V. Right. Every mission up till 14. For the later missions, there's been some doubt as to whether they're on the mission and stuff. But well, for all intents and purposes, the Saturn V was launched. We all saw that. Everyone needs to see that. Now, the astronauts, they stayed in low Earth orbit. Right. They stayed in low Earth orbit. And well, when they were supposed to have the translunar injection burn, an unmanned probe was sent to the moon. Right. And the astronauts, they transmitted their voices to the spacecraft. And that is what all the people at the tracking stations they received. They received signals from an unmanned spacecraft, beaming the voices, beaming these videos that were all pre-filmed on Earth and stuff. Right?
Why,
and so, yes.
Okay. Why fake it 6 times? Each time you do that, if you say that was being done, each time you do it, you increase the odds that you're going to be revealed as faking a moon landing. Why do it 6 times?
Well, obviously,
in your mind, I guess there was never an Apollo 13 explosion on the way to the moon. There was no Apollo at 10. There was no Apollo 8 reading the Bible around the moon. You believe all of that was fake?
Yeah, if I may just clarify your question there, the reason why they obviously they can't just turn around and say, okay, we've done the mission to the moon, let's call it quits and stuff. Obviously, if you look, I've got newspapers back from when my mother was 9 years old at the time. Newspapers saying, oh, we'll have missions to Mars by the 1980s. We'll have bases on the moon. We'll have this. We'll have that. Obviously, okay, those are great ideas, but obviously that wasn't what Kennedy's challenge was. It was land a man on the moon, and we win the space race, right? After the Apollo 11 supposedly met that challenge, they had to find a way to get out of it. You mentioned Apollo 13. The way if I recall correctly, the Apollo 13 actually contributed to the cancellation of the Apollo program. They had already canceled Apollo 20 because they needed its rocket for the Skylab. They canceled Apollos 18 and 19 after the Apollo 13 mission.
Okay, well, let me we don't want to eat up too much time here, but let me get into the reason why none of this happened. And my position here is human behavior. I'm not going to argue science points and who faked the video. I'm not going to argue that. I'm talking about human behavior. And a big hurdle that you have to get over before you can believe any of this is Russia. How old? I was 12 years old when Sputnik started, when Sputnik was launched, 12 years old. To that point, the United States, and I think most of the population of the United States and most of the population of the democratic West saw Russia as this wretchedly poor country that was only relevant on the world stage because of nuclear weapons and this massive army it had. They could not make a refrigerator, much less any cutting edge technology in space. That was the attitude that I was raised to believe in school. We were studying Russia in school at that point. We were taught, hey, they're a third world country with nuclear weapons and a big army. Basically, that's what we believe. Now we wake up on October 4th. They have a satellite up there. It just shocked us. It shocked us to believe that Russia could be advanced like that. And Russia embraced that. For the first time, they were able to stand up on the world stage and say, hey, look at us. We are better than America. We're better than the West. We have satellites up there, and America does not, and the West does not. And they embrace that. They embrace the space race. And so now you have to believe that they're with all of their intelligence resources, they are going to allow us to fake the moon landing, to do it 6 times. Now, do you really believe Russia? And just to be sure, you're pretty young. You weren't alive at the time of this, but I want to share some things with me here. Okay, they ran away with the moon race in the opening gate. First satellite, Sputnik. First animal in Earth orbit. First manned object to escape the Earth's gravity. First probe to hit the moon. First image of the moon's far side. First animals to return safely from Earth. First probe launched to Venus. First human in orbit, Yuri Gagarin, 1961. First probe launched to Mars. First woman in space. First spacewalk. First probe to hit another planet, Venus, First probe to make a soft landing on the moon, Luna 9. First probe in lunar orbit, Luna 10. And I could go on, there's more. Now, here is a country that was clearly invested in beating America to space, to a landing on the moon, a human landing on the moon. They were totally invested in it. They defined themselves. And now you're telling me that with all of their intelligence resources, they're going to sit there and say, okay, yeah, we're going to let America fake the moon landing. I'll let you reply to that.
Yeah, let's give
Well,
Jared
question-
some time. I'll give you some
I got the gist of the question. The question is basically, why did the Russians, let the Americans get away with this thing? Well, first of all, right, I already explained in the in my previous statement that the Russians, they demonstrated themselves how to fake a mission to the moon. You have a spacecraft transmitting voices from there, right? People like to say, oh well, they tracked it. They would have tracked an unmanned probe. But now, as to why they would have kept quiet about that, first of all, right, the Russians themselves, they had openly stated that they couldn't see any way to protect their astronauts from the radiation hazard, right? If they obviously, if they can't prove that the missions was faked with radio signals, the only thing they can say is, oh well, the radiation would have been hazardous, it would have been deadly to the astronauts. Well, now they kind of shot themselves in the foot. If they had ever decided to do it, there's been some discussion as to whether Zond 5, the mission with the voice recorder, was something of a precursor to their own attempt to fake a mission to the moon. Now during the 60s, right? Even yes, the Russians, they were at each other's throats with the United States, but they also had wheat deals going on during the 60s and during the late 70s, and of course, in the early 70s, I should say. And over the 70s, they had something of a detente in which they decided to cooperate with joint space missions. There was the Apollo Soyuz project, you recall. Later, they had the Mir program, and now the International Space Station. Times are kind of changing it now because obviously we've got the war in Ukraine, and Russia has decided to pull out. And as a matter of fact, recently I've actually got this article here. This is an article from RT, the Russian news website. It says, this is the headline: "No proof U.S. landed on the moon. Ex-Russia space boss." This is from what's his name? Dmitry. I'm probably going to butcher this pronunciation. Dmitry Rogozin. He published a post saying that he hasn't seen any evidence to suggest that the astronauts went to the moon. Now, obviously, this is a former space agency guy and stuff like that. But given the way things are with the United States right now, don't be surprised if somewhere down the road Putin says something similar.
Oh, I believe him. Yeah, right. Okay. Again, let's go to human behavior. I mean, you're basically shotgunning a lot of stuff out there that really is irrelevant to the topic at hand. Just wheat deals and all of this. So I'm not going to again address any of this. It's clear to me there's no way I'm going to ever convince you that Apollo unfolded exactly as history books show it unfolded, and you're obviously not going to convince me. So I'm not going to debate those point-on-point things, the Zons and the recordings and stuff. But again, going back to human behavior, do you believe the Apollo 1 fire occurred? 3 astronauts burned to death?
Yes, I do.
You do. Okay. Now imagine that it was one of your family members, most horrific way to die, be locked in a capsule and be burned to death. And now you learn that this is all to fake a moon landing. And you're just going to roll over and say, yeah, I'll join that conspiracy. I have no problem with that. My loved one was burned to death, and I'm going to allow his memory to be disgraced by going along with this conspiracy. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to bring it up at all. And certainly an astronaut wife would know exactly what was supposedly in your mind is going on here with these recordings going to the moon and stuff. An astronaut wife would know that absolutely. A lot of people gonna wear it. So human behavior, are not going to sit there and allow this to be faked. The lunar program to be faked. Not for 1 second. Russia, they had one of their cosmonauts. I'm talking pre-1969. One of their cosmonauts, I forget his name, but anyway.
Vladimir Komarov.
Right. He died when his parachute didn't open coming back to Earth. Now, again, do you think his widow, his comrades are going to sit there and say, we shed blood trying to beat the Americans, and we're going to just roll over and let them fake the moon landing? That is not going to happen. People don't behave that way. I'll give you a second to reply to that.
Yes, have you actually been in touch with the widow and the son of Gus Grissom. In 1999, Scott Grissom, he published an article. He was given access to the Apollo 1 spacecraft, and he published an article saying that he reckons that the spacecraft had been sabotaged. You know, Gus Grissom, he had gone so far as to hang a lemon on the spacecraft. He had actually stated in the newspapers that he believed NASA had only a 1 in 3 chance of making it to the moon. And so,
Well,
but does that necessarily mean that, just to understand where you're coming from, does that mean that it didn't? What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm just telling you what Scott Grissom had published in his article. He believes that the spacecraft had been sabotaged. You know, Bill Kaysing, he shared that idea as well, and he believed that the NASA, they were fearful that because Grissom was going to be their first choice to be the first man on the moon. Suddenly, he's hanging lemons on the spacecraft and you know, not putting good odds for the success of the mission, right? And well, obviously, something's going to, you know, they got to, you know, find somebody else who will be participating in this hoax, and so they had to, you know, and so he wasn't the only one. If I may finish, he wasn't the only one who kicked the bucket so soon after the Apollo 1 fire, because there was that other guy. His name was Thomas Barron. He had written a 500-page report detailing all the shoddy workmanship, all the problems that had plagued the Apollo spacecraft. And he had voiced his concern, his doubts that the Apollo would meet its objectives. And sometime after he testified, this was a few days afterwards, he was found dead at a railroad crossing with his wife and stepdaughter. There was a second stepdaughter who survived. She was only an infant at the time. But obviously, this guy, he put this report out, and suddenly he's dead.
I'm not going to address any of this because, you know, we can sit there and argue about this and not go anywhere. You're not going to convince me. I'm not going to convince you. I'm still going to hammer away on what behavior humans have, and widows and family members who lost husbands, who lost sons, who lost fathers. They are not going to sit there and allow the United States of America to conduct a fraud and disgrace the memory of their loved. Their colleagues are going to allow it. Not ours, not Russia. It just does not happen. And so,
if I may add to that, I really doubt that the astronauts would have been at liberty to tell their wives about, you know, the secret stuff. I doubt. I doubt. If I may finish, I'm sure you're not at liberty to discuss the classified nature of your 2 Department of Defense missions. I'm sure you can't tell me what was the the secret missions that you guys had to pull off on the shuttle. I assume it was something to do with spy satellites, but I assume you're not at liberty to discuss it with me or your wife. And so I doubt that the Apollo astronauts would have been at liberty to discuss the Apollo fraud with their wives.
I guarantee no husband is going to keep that information of faking a moon landing from their spouse. It would not have happened. Let me continue here with some more human behavior things. The space race spanned 3 administrations in the United States. We started out with JFK, a Democrat. He was assassinated, handed over the space race part of the American program was handed over to Johnson. After that, then he did not run for re-election in '68. Nixon showed up, a Republican, showed up in 1969. He was late to the game. 6 months later is when the Apollo 11 occurred. Again, let's talk human behavior. Here you are, a president. You're a Republican, and you step into the office in January of 1969, and you're going to immediately know and be informed, because it's going to happen on your watch, that Apollo 11 is going to land on the moon. And you learn at that point that it is all fake. There is not going to be any landing. There's not even going to go to the moon. There's going to be some robot going up there. Now, it cost the American taxpayer $250 billion to get to the fake moon in your mind, but to get to the moon. Now, here you are, a Republican, and you step in there. You have this gift on your plate. All you have to do is call a press conference and say, hey, the Democratic Party, for two administrations and for 7-8 years has been perpetrating a $250 billion fraud on the American taxpayers. And you're going to say, hey, I'm revealing this to you. What's going to happen? He's guaranteed a 2-term presidency. He's probably going to, every congressman and every senator that participated in that fraud would never get reelected. So he's going to have a super majority in the Senate and the Congress. He's going to have it all. Now, are you telling me that you're a Republican president and you have this revealed to you that's been wrought by a Democratic administrations over 6 or 8 years, and you're going to sit there and go along with a fake moon landing? People do not do that. Politicians do not do that. They are going to make hay with that knowledge. They are going to guarantee their future political career. It's guaranteed by revealing that. I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
Well, first of all, the Apollo, there's only one Apollo mission during Johnson administration, and that was right up towards the very end. It was the Apollo 8 mission, which was supposed to be the first around the moon and back. And there's, you know, what was his name? You know, there is some argument to say that you know, the presidents, they were given secret knowledge that they cannot disclose and stuff. In fact, Bill Clinton actually hinted about it in his autobiography that during his 8 years in Washington, quote, he saw some, because actually, I should just give some context. He had stated that after Apollo 11 supposedly took place, he had been in touch with this old carpenter who didn't believe it happened. He writes in his autobiography, at the time I thought he was a crank. During my years in Washington, I saw some things on TV that made me wonder if he wasn't ahead of his time. Now, as for Nixon and Johnson, there is some argument to say, obviously I believe Nixon would have been compliant because they obviously need to look like, okay, here we've got as you say, we've got this enemy, the Russians. We need to look superior against them, right? And so what's he going to do? Okay, shall we say, oh well, my predecessor he faked one orbit around the moon, right? Or should we have to meet the objective to make us look superior in the public's eye? You know, there's got a noise going around here. That's the thing. And this is where's I've got this somewhere. Recently there has also been, Bart Sabrell actually brought this up in his book. He got in touch with this one fellow who was the son of a guy at Cannon Air Force Base, and his name was I've got it right here somewhere. What was his name? Hang on, here we go. The guy's name was Eugene Cyrus Akers. He says he was at the Air Force Base where they were filming Apollo 11, right? And he provided a list of all these people who were privy to the filming. He reckons it happened in 1968. Both Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson's names are on that list of people who are privy to this.
So it must be true then, huh? In your mind. I'm not going to argue it with you. I'm going to throw out some more reasons why in human behavior, what you're saying is absolute false.
Just with respect to, shouldn't we proceed to Danielle's schedule? Yeah. We've already taken about 20 minutes along these lines.
I would like to make a couple other points. Here, let me tell you, and I should have said this at the beginning. My objective here is not to convince you that we landed on the moon. And as I said, you're not going to convince me that we didn't land on the moon. My objective here is I want people that are watching to be critical thinkers. To not, I mean, you're just shotgunning out a bunch of stuff. People saw this, people did that. Just shotgunning this stuff out. In fact, let me ask you, have you read any Apollo history? Did you read the right stuff? Carrying the Fire? Carrying the Fire. You read that? You read the right stuff?
I've read some of the. I've read the right stuff. I've got a whole stacks and stacks of astronaut autobiographies. I've got.
So you can read all of that, and if you're an astrophysicist, as you said is that true? As Danielle said,
true. Of course, that's true. Yes.
Why are you afraid of history? I mean, that's what why the moon landing? What about the shuttle? Was the shuttle real? Did it really actually come back and land on the moon?
If I may interject, why don't we take a moment for Jared? Why don't you explain your viewpoints and why you believe what you believe, and then we can circle back to that? Because I know that you do research you've read a lot about the autobiographies of astronauts. So if you could just extrapolate on what you believe and why you believe that, I think that would be great.
Well, I believe what I do is because the data suggests that it was all a fake. You know, I honestly tried to believe the moon missions were real. You know, I grew up, you know, dreaming of being the first man on Mars. You know, I looked up to astronauts like you. I was of the shuttle generation, obviously, and stuff. So I grew up watching, you know, videos of the shuttle launches and stuff. My hero was Andy Thomas, you know, the Australian astronaut. And yeah, but one day, right, I hear about the moon landing hoax, and well, I took it with a grain of salt, and I decided to, okay, go back to everything I had learned previously about space travel, right? And I found the books that people had put out, and I found all the counter websites, counter arguments, counter books, and stuff like that. And I cross-referenced stuff. I cross-referenced the data, and what I found is that the people who were, you know, saying, oh no, we did really go to the moon and stuff like that. Yeah, it's all these people are just con artists, yada yada yada. Right. I know. I saw your name actually quoted as a what's the word? Endorsement. I saw your name quoted as an endorsement for Phil Plate's book, and Plate, for example, after Bill Kaysing died, right? He went around saying that Kaysing denied any space travel was real, which is a lie. Kaysing did not say that that all space travel is faked. He said that the Apollo missions were faked, you know, and he, in fact, even in the TV show that Plate reviewed, Kaysing explicitly says the astronauts remained in Earth orbit for the duration of their mission. Okay, and so I got really, really pissed by the way the way Bill Kaysing was trolled, that I felt I should, you know, write up an essay, you know, debunking all this phony counter evidence that Plate and the others keep putting out. And of course, that ultimately became my Moonfaker series. The reason I believe that it was a hoax, right? First of all, I'll give you two reasons. The radiation hazard. Okay. Now I found the coordinates. I found the coordinates that have actually been attributed to Apollo 11, the outbound trajectory. Okay. And I used the industry standard model, the AP8. This is it's derived from satellite data of all these satellites in the 1960s and the 1970s. You plug in the coordinates, it gives you the proton fluxes. Okay, here are the fluxes. I did the calculations, and I even took the extra step, mind you, of applying the correction factors, because the AP8 is known to underestimate the fluxes, you know. So there's been subsequent measurements, they found that it was much higher than expected. I did the calculations, and I found that the Van Allen radiation belt, the astronauts' trips through the Van Allen radiation belt, it would have delivered about 100 rem for the two-way trip. Okay, that's life-threatening. Okay, now here's something I'll tell you as a geologist. Okay, I know a lot of people like to cite the moon rocks as evidence for the Apollo missions being real, but in fact, I find so much counter evidence in all the reports that have been put out about these rocks. Like, for example, they say that, first of all, right off the bat, the Apollo samples, they're chemically and mineralogically similar to terrestrial mafic rocks. These are rocks that, you know, come out of a volcano, right? Well, they when they got the rocks back, they started to find up to 1,000 parts per million of water in there. Originally, they said, oh, it's just contamination, but no, we find there's also ferric iron oxide in the rocks. The reason this is important is because when a rock first crystallizes, the only iron it contains is metallic iron or ferrous iron. You expose it to the air for a long time, what happens? It starts to rust. The Apollo 16 samples in particular were notorious for this. There's even this one sample called Rusty Rock. You can see in the pictures, it's got all this red rust covering it on the inside of it too and everything. And most recently, this actually surfaced a few years back. A rock from Apollo 14. Please don't think I'm picking on your grandfather's mission and stuff, but a rock from Apollo 14 is called Big Bertha. A sample of it turned out to be proven to have come from Earth. You can find that, all the news reports about that online. They say that as I said before, the rocks in general, they all turned out to be similar to mafic rocks from Earth. What gave this one away is because there was a zircon inside it, and the surrounding material was felsic in composition. Felsic rock is like granites and stuff. This is basically rocks that are formed from the melting and solidification of sedimentary rocks. You know, we don't get sedimentary rocks on Earth, so this has to be from the Earth. But they said, oh, it must be an Earth meteorite. And I'll tell you, this is a little of as soon as I read that, I actually got flashbacks to when I was doing my geology course. We had a lecture in which they were discussing meteorites, from other planets and from the asteroids and whatnot. And I've actually looked at the samples. It's very interesting and stuff. We had samples they gave out in class and stuff. Anyways, when they got to this subject in the lecture, he specifically says, "You will notice that we don't have any rocks from Venus. Why don't we have any meteorites from Venus?" And he said the answer was because Venus is comparable in size to the Earth. And so even in the meteorite collisions, it's unlikely that the rocks would be carried to escape velocity and find their way to the Earth. So if it's unlikely you're going to get escape velocities that can take asteroids meteorites from Venus to the Earth, it's doubtful that the Earth could send, there would be crashes into the Earth and send all this debris up to the moon. Find me a Venus meteorite, then we'll talk about that idea. In the meantime, it looks, from my chair, this looks like okay, this proves that the Apollo 14 didn't go to the moon, because one of these rocks is definitely from the Earth. And
okay, yeah, say one more thing, and then
I would just like to, yeah. There's a article, as a matter of fact, this is a Chinese article regarding the recent samples that they brought back. This is a Chinese news article. They talk about how different they were from the Apollo samples. And they say here, this is a direct quote. The article is called, what is it called? "The first results from the Chang'e 5 lunar sample research have been released, which are different from the samples donated by Apollo in the United States." You see, they took their gift display and cross-compared that with their samples. They say the original plan for Chang'e 5 was sampling, the original plan for the Chang'e 5 lunar sampling was to take 2 kilograms of lunar soil, but in fact, only 1,731 grams were taken. The reason may be that the density of the lunar soil was wrongly calculated. The basis for this calculation was the density of the lunar soil, the 1 gram that was donated by the United States. The United States may have concealed key data. Therefore, and here's the clincher here, therefore, although we do not doubt the authenticity of the moon landing, it is more doubtful whether the lunar samples it sent as gifts, especially the 1 gram of lunar soil it sent to China, really came from the moon. Mm-hmm. So that's like, oh, well, they're sort of being cagey about it. They're saying, oh, well, we don't doubt the samples, but we don't doubt the moon landings, but we do doubt the samples that they gave us. What would be the point if you went to the moon? What would be the point of giving out fake samples? Because presumably you would have the real stuff.
Well, let me jump in here, because I think we're in a really awesome situation where we have somebody who went to space and somebody who doesn't believe we landed on the moon, right? And I think you started this by saying I would be open to, if I were wrong, right? Are there any questions that you have for Mike that are questions that you would like to know from somebody who's gone to space that may sway your opinion? And I'll do the opposite.
Do you really believe I went into space?
Of course I do. I believe. In fact, let me just say this up front. I know this probably doesn't mean much after 37 years, but you have my condolences. I know that you shared your first space flight with Judith Resnick. I know Challenger is one of your talks that you give about, and I understand this must be a very difficult subject for you, what with having flown on the shuttle with one of the people who died in that horrible disaster. And I guess one of my questions for you would be and stuff, when you flew those 3 flights into space, did you see the stars whilst orbiting the daylight side of the Earth?
Just the brightest, Sirius, and the planets, the brightest planets. And you had to have the light. There's just too much light scattering off the Earth. It's just like trying to look at the sky in a brightly lit parking lot at night. Your pupil of your eye is cranked down. It's just not sensitive enough to pick up the stars when you have so much light reflecting in your eyes.
Yeah, so I wanted to cross compare that, because Neil Armstrong, he had stated when he was on the daylight side of the moon, he couldn't see any stars at all, despite the moon being so much dimmer than the Earth. And I've seen stories from other people who have been to space. Michael Melville, for example, he said he was able to see the stars and the planets and all that. So I wanted to cross compare. But if I will say this, what I would like to see, I know this was actually proposed by somebody at the what was it? It was the European Southern Observatory. They had the very large telescope They had proposed using, they have an interferometer mode, but I recently learned that it only uses 2 of the telescopes. They had a proposal back in the early 2000s to, connect all 4 telescopes together using fiber optics, use it as one big interferometer, and see if they can find the lunar module. They said they were proposing that for, calibration purposes and the like. Obviously, nothing ever came about from that. There's been proposals for an even larger telescope, the what do you call it? The extremely large telescope. And that would be an interesting project to undertake, because then you can look at the moon in real time through a telescope and have a look at the see what's up there. Mm-hmm.
Okay, what I'm hearing is white noise here. Danielle, I would like to, can I take some time here and make some points?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes, I think it's time to put the ball back in your court.
Okay, what I'm hearing is a conspiracy of tens of thousands of people around the planet, people that got the fake moon rocks, the geologists there that would have to go along with saying they were real. You got NASA, you got Congress, you got the president, you got the widows of those that were killed willing to go along with this. You've got the Russians. You got all of these people in this gigantic conspiracy. And yet nobody has found this out in an by the investigative newspapers that are out there, the investigative reporters. Nobody has discovered that any of this, what you're saying, any of it is in fact rooted in fact. I don't know how it is in Australia.
You're putting my stance into a different context. The fact of the matter, I don't believe that it was involved thousands and thousands of people and stuff. But if you want to look at secrecies that involve thousands of things, you brought up the Russian moon program.
Listen, I want my time here on this, Danielle.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I apologize.
To be more aggressive here. I want to.
Okay, I'll be more aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the United States, everybody that watches the news locally will see these investigative reporters with a camera person trailing after some politician, some city official, county official, somebody who has been found with their hand in the taxpayer's cookie jar. You keep ignoring the fact that $250 billion, and that is the fact in current year dollars, was spent on what you believe was this enormous conspiracy, this rate. And if there was a shred of evidence that that is true, the investigative reporters in this country would have long ago discovered it. They desperately are in search of any malfeasance on the part of politicians. And this would be so gigantic, they would want to be that person that had the scoop, that got the Pulitzer Prize for revealing to the American public that there was $250 billion spent just to fake the moon landing. And that has never occurred. And I guarantee if there was a shred of proof, of actual proof, you throw out all of these names and books and all of this other stuff, it's just a smokescreen. You're like an illusionist in Vegas with a trick. Don't think critically. Don't stand back and think of the behavior of individuals and of groups of people. The press that's out there are sharks. I don't know about your country, but there's sharks in this country. They desperately want to be recognized. These newspaper publishers and these investigative reporters want to find the story that shows, yeah, this was a fake of enormous proportions of $250 billion. And that has not happened. That, I guarantee right there, is proof positive that everything you're saying is not true. Everything. Because if there was, it would have been revealed by these investigative reporters. I don't know where to go from here, but I have another thing. You got a conspiracy of these thousands and thousands. Let me, in your mind, how many people are in this conspiracy? Just give me a number, and don't go into anything else. Just give me a number, an approximate number. 10?
Probably about maybe. I never really put it down to a number, but I would have to say maybe about 100 at the most, I guess.
So you got the president, the Congress, NASA, Mission Control,
you're putting my statements into a different context. Let me clarify this position, okay? It is my understanding that the people at Houston, for example, they don't need to know or care where the data that they're getting from the moon comes from, or supposedly from the moon comes from. You know, they just, okay, here's the data on our screens. We make decisions from that. Okay, and in fact, Eugene Kranz actually stated in his book that the simulators were so real that no controller could tell the difference between the training and the real mission. And I already explained to you that the Soviets themselves demonstrated how to send a probe to the moon and make it look like astronauts' voices are coming from there. So anybody who's tuning in, listening in, they think, oh, okay, this must be proof that they went. Obviously, you know, obviously there would be the president, the head of the CIA, the Joint Chiefs of Staff and stuff. These people are very high up the food chain. They would be the ones in the know, okay. And then you've got the people who would be obviously, you know, filming this and faking this and stuff. And so this idea that I think that there were thousands and thousands of people that were involved is just a straw man. But I will say this: if you want to argue about a conspiracy involving thousands and thousands of people being kept under wraps, look no further than the Soviet space program, the Soviet moon landing. They said, they were on the record saying that they were never even attempting they were never in a race to begin with. That was the phrase they used.
Okay, Jared, I'm gonna jump in because we're focusing here on the Apollo program. So what I'm gonna do now, I think I'll hand it back over to Mike. Mike, I'm gonna give you 2 to 3 minutes for your wrap up statements. Jared, you 2 to 3 minutes for yours, and then we have a bunch of questions from the audience, and then I promised everyone this won't go over an hour. So Mike, let's turn it over to you.
Again, I'm not going to address anything that Jared is throwing out there. Again, in my ears, it's white noise. You know, to camouflage the fact that real history occurred. We landed on the moon. And I want people out there to be critical thinkers and stand back and look at human behavior and really ask yourself. There's some wit one time famously said, I don't, it's been attributed to Ben Franklin or I don't know, other people, but it's 2 people can keep a secret if one is dead. And the idea that you have all of these people involved in this conspiracy. And by the way, you're talking about people who are looking at prison time if this conspiracy was revealed. Now, imagine you go into some NASA, you know, and say, hey, buddy, you're not getting anything out of this. The astronauts are going to get a ticker tape parade for fake moon landing, but you're not getting anything out of this except being exposed to a prison time for being involved in a conspiracy to rip the American public off for $250 billion. People don't do that. They're not going to join in that conspiracy. But in your mind, we have a conspiracy, and you try to reduce it to a few numbers, and if that is not possible, you have to have Congress who's writing the bills and overseeing the contracts that are being written and what they're spending money on. You got NASA, you got contractors, you got Russia, you got the geologists, you got the widows, you got Rush, you got all of these people, tens of thousands of people involved in this gigantic conspiracy. And nobody has ever revealed that in some investigative report. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. And people, again, I'm talking not to you, but to the people out there that are listening. Be a critical thinker. Stand back and look when people are sharing theories like this. Really look critically at it. And don't get your information from the internet. Go to a library. Subscribe to a newspaper. Newspapers from a credible newspaper. If you don't read it in a credible newspaper, it did not happen. If you read it, it did happen. And you haven't read. There's no credible newspaper out there with an investigative report showing how we faked the moon landing. But read credible newspapers. Don't go to websites that are feeding on each other. Oh, I did some research. You hear people say, I did some research. What do? They went to another website that has the same belief system. But it's so important because it's getting dangerous out there with people just throwing out a photo or a video with AI out there. It's so easy to fake things now. I don't know if you saw how many people saw Harrison Ford's movie, the latest Indiana Jones movie, but for the first 30 minutes of that movie, he is there as a 35-year-old man. That doesn't exist. He wasn't 35. That's on some computer code. It's AI that did that. And it's going to be very, very easy in the future to be tricked by AI and dangerous, frankly, to see things out there and believe them. So go to a credible news source. read newspapers, go to the library. Don't get your information off these websites. It's dangerous. Be a critical thinker.
Okay, I agree. And Jara, for your wrap up, you got 3 minutes, and then we're going to go to audience questions.
Okay, well, first of all, I just would like to make my position absolutely clear. Okay, I'm not saying that there were thousands and thousands of people involved. That's a horrible straw man. Okay, there's been lies all the time. They spend billions of dollars on lies all the time. They spend billions of dollars to say there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Obviously there wasn't. That was a lie, and the Congress was bought on that. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just putting that out there as a counterexample and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, okay, the data from my chair, it suggests that the Apollo missions were faked. Okay, we have data that's I've done my calculations. It clearly shows that the astronauts shouldn't have been able to survive the radiation. I've even got data from Apollo 16. In that one, we have a data from one of the solar flares during that flight, and it shows that one flare alone on April, what was the date? I got it on the computer here right now. Here we go. It clearly says that April 18, 1972, I took the fluxes, I did the calculations, and it showed they should have received 10 rem from that one flare alone. Then you got all the radiation from the Van Allen belt. Okay, it just doesn't add up. They report, they only reported very minuscule amount of radiation they received. There's even the whole Orion spacecraft now, even that has like 3 times as much shielding as Apollo, and that's detecting much more radiation than the Apollo astronauts would have received. Okay, and that's despite all their extra shielding. And as I said before, we got an example from Apollo 14 where there's a rock that is indeed come from the Earth. Okay, what else more can I say? It's and just trying to think of some closing statements here.
You got about it's 1.5 more minutes.
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, didn't like being on time. Okay, it's my chair that the data suggests that they didn't go to the moon. Okay, and so that is my stance, and I'm happy to hear happy to see a picture of the landing site through a big telescope if that's ever done. Okay, and well, I'm happy to have this discussion with you, but I just want to make my position absolutely clear. Okay, I don't want to have my position strawmanned or taken out of context or anything like that. I'm just stating what the facts are suggesting. I'm not getting this from fake news websites, whatever you want to call them and stuff. This is from the actual data. I've looked through the peer review journals. I found the actual papers for the thing. Now the geologists they see all these problems with the rocks, but they are desperately trying to find reasons to justify it. They say, oh well, it must have been contamination. Well, the only place where they found comparable amounts of water and rust is in the poles. We can happily get huge amounts of water there, and so yeah, that's what I can say about that.
I have one question. Do you believe we sent the Artemis 1 capsule around the moon unmanned?
I'm sorry, would you repeat your question? Sorry.
Do you believe that the first Artemis mission, the SLS, carried the capsule to around the moon? It was unmanned. The first one was unmanned. Yes,
I do. Yes, I believe the Artemis 1 went around the moon, and I've got actually the data from that mission. It indicates that they were receiving something like 0.014 rem per day. And that's much higher than any of the skin doses attributed to the Apollo astronauts.
Are you going to believe
the entire mission?
Artemis 3 or 4 with humans to the moon? Are you going to believe that?
Well, here's something I would like to say. Personally, I think they'll just cancel the thing before it even gets off the ground. But if the Artemis does get launched, here's an open message to the astronauts who are to fly this thing. Here's what I want you to do. Okay, you take some videos of yourself while you're floating around in the cabin. Okay, you obviously be doing this, doing that, floating up and down in the same shot, the same continuous shot. Pan the camera to the window and show us the Earth far away. In every example, I guarantee, in every example that I have seen from the Apollo missions, whenever they have films of the astronauts aboard the spacecraft, floating around this and that. But when they try to show us the Earth, the camera blacks out, they cut it or whatever and stuff. Then they show us. By the same logic, I can take a video of myself, flying on a plane, or and then cut the camera and show, hey, here's a picture of the Earth, a picture of the Earth that I've just, here's a globe that I'm just shooting at and stuff. Shh, that's the real Earth. That's literally the kind of smoke and mirrors that we have to deal with here and stuff. What I'm saying is that if the Artemis, if by some miracle this isn't cancelled before it even gets off the ground, right? If they are going to go on that flight, show us the continuous shot of yourself in the cabin and the Earth out the window. I'll believe you then.
Okay, and I'm going to jump to audience questions real quick. The first one is for you, Jera. Are you aware many telescopes on Earth, including large observatories and amateur telescopes, have been used to observe and photograph the landing sites of the Apollo missions on the moon? How do you explain these observations if we never landed on the moon? And you have like a minute and a half because we want to get through some questions.
Okay, sure. Well, the ground-based telescope that they've used to resolve the quote landing sites, it's very important to distinguish between landing sites and artifacts. The telescopes that they've used to take pictures of the landing sites, they don't have that kind of resolution to see hardware on the surface. And as for the landscape features and stuff, even before the Apollo missions happened, they had the lunar orbiter probes and various unmanned flights to take pictures of the moon's surface up close, so they would know what it looked like, and they're actually able to build, sets and models off that, for training purposes, of course. And so that's my theory for why the any landscape features would match, post Apollo and Apollo pictures. Here's an obvious question: if Apollo was real, right? What would be a better idea? Oh, let's send the astronauts to the moon and hope that where we're gonna, send them to land down will be safe to touch down in. Or second thought, maybe it'd be smarter. Send some probes there, take some pictures. Okay, this place is rough, this place is smooth. There, let's find the best place to land with these close-up pictures.
Well, they did. NASA landed 6 surveyors on the moon before Apollo went up there. They sent back.
Yeah, I'm talking about the orbital flights. I'm talking about the orbital flights for that. But yes, they have surveyor flights. And as a matter of fact, the Indian space probe recently released pictures from the Chandrayaan-2. And the picture of the Apollo 11 site shows what can only be described as a 3-legged surveyor spacecraft. It doesn't look like the lunar module at all.
Okay, we're going to move on to Mike. Do you have any response as far as the radiation argument? No.
Okay. I think it's white noise. I think it's just
okay.
We wore dosimeters up there in the shuttle. OSHA applied to us the requirements for radiation exposure, just as they would for anybody working in a nuclear power plant or a nuclear submarine, to make sure we did not get any significant doses of radiation. I'm sure the Apollo people had dosimeters on them too, and obviously they're alive and walking. They walked on the moon, and many of them lived to very advanced ages. No, I don't.
Sorry.
Oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, let Mike finish.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying it's. I'm not going to sit there and argue rims. The reality is we went to the moon. People, I mean, I'm not saying radiation isn't something that has to be considered. Certainly, going to anytime you're out from underneath the protective magnetic field of the Earth, you're exposed to dangerous radiation. And in fact, when we go to the moon and go to Mars, that has to be considered. There has to be shielding, particularly on Mars, where you're going to be exposed for a very long time going to Mars and coming back. You're going to have definitely foolproof shielding in case you have a bad solar flare. There's no question about that. But again, scientists will work on that, and they'll solve that problem just as they did to get to the moon. There's another thing that pops into mind. Listen to Jared here and throw all this out. I don't know if you've ever heard of Oak. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. Occam's razor. There was a philosopher who once was a guy that said that the simplest explanation for an event is usually the correct explanation, simplest. And Jared, I keep saying Jared, what you're suggesting is this incredible series of unbelievable things to come to a conclusion, whereas the simple conclusion is the United States said we were going to beat the Russians to the moon. They paid a heavy price in money and blood to do it. They did it. They did it 6 times. The greatest engineering accomplishment and safety accomplishment in the history of humanity, frankly, was the lunar program. And it's the simple explanation. You don't have to come up with all these different things. In fact, it's simpler. It would have cheaper to get to the moon as we did than it would be to do all of these things that you're describing. It's just not possible.
I don't agree, but I would like to ask just a clarification on what you said about the dosimeters and stuff. I know that you had dosimeters on the shuttle and stuff, but the shuttle only orbits below the Van Allen radiation belts. The only real issue from radiation you guys got to worry about was the South Atlantic anomaly, which was this region where it dips lower than normal. And it's, to my understanding, the dose rates there are much lower than what the Apollo astronauts would have been exposed to.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, we were not exposed like people going to the moon outside of the Earth's protective magnetic field. No question about it. You got to address it. But sitting there saying that it could not be addressed, the idea that in Apollo that somehow we couldn't send astronauts because of the danger of radiation, I absolutely reject that. It's just another technological hurdle that scientists and engineers were able to solve and do it, got us to the moon just as we said we were going to do. That is the simplest explanation, and you should not be sitting there trying to throw out all of this stuff.
Have you read this book, Mike?
No, I have not.
Well, this is booked by the various people who are at the Marshall Space Flight Center, and in that they have a diagram. This is on the section is by J.W. Keller et al. This is from 1963. They actually
30 seconds to finish because I need to.
Okay. They show a diagram. They show a diagram that shows the Apollo spacecraft were only shielded up to 8 grams per square. Up to 8 MeV protons. Okay, the data I've got is greater than that. It would have gone straight through the spacecraft and buried themselves in the astronauts.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off, Tara. I'm sorry, but I have to hand it to you both because we have successfully had a conversation in which everyone was kind and respectful, and no one, we made it through the whole hour, and I really appreciate it. There's some questions that I can. How do I? One thing that I definitely need to ask is, how can the people who are watching, how can they stay in touch with you? Are there any materials that you want to talk about? You both have about a minute and a half to answer that. Mike, why don't you start?
Well, if anybody wants to contact me, they can go to my website, MikeMullane.com. But I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to be answering a lot. If I get a bunch of emails yelling at me or I get too much email, folks. You can send anything you want. I'll just hit delete if I don't want to reply to it. So just giving you a fair warning there. And I got some books. If anybody want to check out my memoir, Riding Rockets, or any of the children's book I have, feel free to. You can check that out on my website, MikeMullane.com.
Amazing. And Jara?
Okay, well, you can reach me via my email address, jarrahw@gmail.com. It's JARRAHW. Okay, I'm happy. I receive many emails a day and stuff like that, to many hundreds and stuff. So I don't have time to respond to each and every one of them, but I do make my efforts to keep in touch. And as it says in the description, I acquired the rights to NASA Moon to America by Ralph Renee. I keep the book in print. Now, just a fair warning, if you are going to try to get this book, get it from ralphrenee.com. Right, the book that's on Amazon is a pirated copy. Somebody found an outdated earlier edition of the book and just posted it to Amazon Create Space or KDP, whatever it's called, and stuff, and just sold it illegally without written approval in writing. And so then I've got my own website, which needs to be updated a little bit and stuff here and there. But my website is moonfager.com. And if you want to follow any of my videos, it's White Jarrah, basically my surname before my first name. And I've put several articles on aulis.com. That's AULIS.com. All
right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, I really appreciate the participants, Jara and Colonel Mike Mullane. Thank you very much. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day. And yeah, all right. We'll see you guys at the next live stream.
Bye-bye.
Nice.
Bye.
See you around.
Thank you. Hang on, let me end the live stream.